Gonna do something a little special today. I got my wife's 2018 Subaru Forester and just kind of needs that face upgrade that you see on like the newer Forester in a sense. So what I got lined up is I got a sport grille, and then I've got for the headlights I've got some Morimoto projectors I'm gonna be adding, as well as retrofitting C-Light, just like you see on the WRX and the newer Forester. It's gonna be nice and bright from Diode Dynamics. And we need some fog lights there. We're missing the factory fogs and even the plastic covers. So by the time we're done with her, she's gonna be less chrome, more LED, and hopefully looking a little bit more proper this day and age. So follow along, we'll get her done. All right, so the minimal viable products I bought in for this conversion is the 2014 to 2018 Subaru Sport bumper. And then in the lighting section, let's see, for Diode Dynamics C-Lights, it's a Forester. They don't make them for the Forester. So I've got the Legacy ones and the WRX. I own the WRX. They're good pieces and they look like they meet up, but I've seen a couple of people use the Legacy. I brought them both in just so I had flexibility here, as well as the shrouds. I brought in different shrouds for the Morimoto projectors. I've got the Hella 5G Chrome, the Iris, and the E55R. So we're going to see what looks best with those. Of course, I've got, along with the D2S's, the projectors, I've got the Morimoto Retro Rubber Resealing Glue. Say that 5 times fast. And then for the fog lights, didn't go OEM. Better than OEM, I've got some glass fog lights. This is where I picked them up from. Not advertising for any of these companies, just letting you know where I got them from, as well as some LED fog lights just to make that front end pop a little bit more. Alright, before we get started here, I do want to note you want to mark your level trim for your low beam to make sure that when you install your headlights you can have a point of reference to level them back to that point. I confirmed the means of the Morimoto hole at 1 3/8 inches, so make sure you can cut that hole. I'll show you how I'm doing that later. I've retrofitted these before. I was looking for my notes and I couldn't find them. So I know for one thing the DRL is right here, and that DRL, how that works is when the car's running and the e-brake is off, that light, which is the high beam, is fed a lower voltage. I think probably like 6 volts lower than, so it just gives that ugly yellow luminescent look I'm not a fan of. That's why I'll be reworking the C-Lights Morimoto. And I was just having a look. I always like making a diagram. This is similar to one I lost from my old Forester, and I'm going to make sure that I know the behavior of each of the lights. The next part here, I'm going to remove the bumper. Pretty easy on a Forester. To remove the headlight for further analysis. Then of course the retrofit. I've got 6 10mm bolts, so I'm going to take them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rinse and repeat on the second side to pull both headlights. Just a side note, when you separate the, when you remove the headlights, the security bracket kind of comes out with it but wants to fall on its own, so just to keep that retained location. And then when you get the headlights ready to remove, it's these connectors you're after right here. So one down there going to like a some kind of module. I think it's for the DRL, and then this one, the tabs underneath. All right, so the first modification I make is I disconnect the running light, or the DRL relay. So what this does is when the when the ignition is on, the headlights are off, and the parking light is down, this light, which is also your high beam, illuminates like a soft yellow, which is one of my pet peeves. And how it does it is it's that relay kit, resistor. So if I disconnect this resistor, that behavior no longer is there. It's beneficial for the lighting, and it's also beneficial for the bi-xenons that go into that, because what they use is they use that voltage, 12 volts, to open and shut that lid. What do we call it? A little reflector that opens up and makes it high beam. So I don't want to run partial voltage to it, which might burn up the coil over time. So this way I'm only getting the high beam when I turn on the high beams, and it's not getting voltage otherwise. It's not getting like half voltage from the resistor. All right, I've got my passenger headlight out here, and I'm just kind of looking over what I'm going to do to get it oven ready. This module is going to come off with 3 Phillips head screws. Looks about that. And then I'm going to basically pull all the wiring, removing the bulbs. This is the corner light, which is basically a DRL that's on with the running lights and headlights. This is the C-Light. This is from the rear. It is the low beam. So this is the hole I'm going to be modifying to fit in the D2S's. And this is the lead I'm going to be taking power from into a relay kit. So when the headlights turn on, powers the relay kit, taking power from the fuse box and powering my my HID kit that goes in my D2S. And then I have my high beam right here, and my high beam will remain intact. I'm going to leave my high beam, but I'm going to tap into the positive wire here, and then probably positive and negative to run it to the D2S bi-xenon relay. So I'm going to remove that, remove the connectors as well. I'll get going. And with the wiring harness out of the way, I've got 5 screws to remove. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Forgot to mention, one thing you can do to ensure you do not break any clips is take a heat gun. I've got a wall heat gun here. I'll go along each clip and I'll heat up the clip, and then I will bend it back so they don't interfere. What I see happen with the oven, sometimes it's hot enough to melt the glue, but when I go to pull this back, it's still too brittle and it breaks. So this is one thing you could do just to kind of make your life easier when you are pulling it out of the oven. You could just focus on that seam and not necessarily all the lock tabs. I have both the driver side and passenger wiring harness pulled out now, and one of the things I like retaining is being able to, of course, have a modular headlight, so I can pull it out and put it back in without soldering anything directly. So I'm going to go right for the low beams. Those are the H11s right here. I'm going to cut those connectors straight off. I'm using the Innovite, the connector that came with it. I'm going to add it to the low beam side of my wiring harness. So you could have just started from the OEM low beam connector, cut it off, and we're going to add the Innovite kit. Do note that the polarity's switched on it, so blue actually goes to black. So I'm going to get that done on both connectors now. Then when I'm done, I'll have the factory wiring harness, and the low beam side will go to the connector that'll plug into the Innovate ballast and then power the HIDs for my test. Alright, got one yummy headlight baking at 260 degrees Fahrenheit. It's in my convection oven here. Yeah, you can't see anything in there. But basically, wet towel over the complete lens. And then in the rear, I just do some basic foil over anything I couldn't remove. And I do 10 minutes to determine how soft the glue is, how easy it is to remove the lens, and I go from there. Alright, so these headlights have been baked for a total of 12 minutes to 60 degrees. I'm going to try to separate them. Again, I've moved ahead those plastic clips. This end is rooted, if you will, in this corner right here, so you're always going to work at the opposite corner. I think it's usually the inside of the headlight, the inside where it would go mounted to the car. So I'm going to start separating these. Slow and steady is the game here. Good tool to have at your disposal. Scissor, but also this little guy for sewing. And what you can do is you can cut it as it's going, because you don't want to let that drape across and then smudge everything up. So try to keep that in control. A lot of things to keep your eye on. So from here I need to pull out of that corner. And there we go. After our headlight comes out of the oven and it's opened up, we have to remove the reflector here so we could open up that hole to allow throughput for the Morimoto D2Ss. So these are held on 3 positions. You have 2 kind of locking tabs right there, so you can use a screwdriver on each side. Push those in, pull that out, and do the same with that retaining post over there. And then the third point, since these are adjustable headlights, that is, you can change it up, down, left, right. You remove this. So you unscrew this all the way, which extends that post, and then you can remove it. To make your life easier, also requires step, remove these 2 grommets. With the reflector out, we're going to remove the little back reflector here that reflects the incandescent back to the bulb. Very easy how to remove that. It's on the low beam side, and we're going to tackle that Phillips screw right there, and then the assembly will come out, and then we're left to open that hole up. Alright, so with my reflector gone, I now have to basically open this hole to fit the 1 3/8 inch D2S stem, we'll call it, the rear of the projector. So what I have to do that is the stepping drill bit, and it goes up to 1 3/8. So I basically just keep opening up the front and the back until I could fit that post in. The last time I did this 3 years ago, I preemptively cut a line to actually shorten this base, but I see no problem with keeping the extended base. So I'm gonna try to just open up the hole first. Then if I have to bring this down, I'll bring this down. That's about it. So 1 minute with my 1 3/8 stepping drill bit told me this is a no-go. The 1 3/8 stem of the Morimoto is exactly the width of this inner ring right here. So I could sit here all I want for hours, and even if I did get this low enough with my stepping bit, probably might not be even. So this is why last time I was looking at my reference photos from last time, and so what I did is I wrapped a piece of tape around the stem of this, kind of finding a level balance between those 2 pieces, and then I marked it and I cut that off flat, and that's what I'm about to do now. Okay. Alright, so to flatten these symmetrically so they point relatively straight, I want to cut it flush. So what I've done here for this post that's going to interfere again with that D2S post, I put a piece of 1/2 inch electrical tape here, and then I've put a marker line there, so that's my cut line. Pretty easy work cutting through that with a reinforced Dremel disc. So I cut along the line, so now I've got a 1/2 inch of that back removed. And now just to make it flush, I'm going to take my belt sander and just kind of make that flat, even flatter, so when that projector sits, it's nice and flat. Got the OEM reflector post ground down, nice and flat. And from here, I'm going to go back to my drill. I'm going to step it up that hole to 1 3/4, and using the projector, I'm going to make sure that fits before bolting that on. Alright, it's official. I've got both holes opened up with the shortened stem, and on one of these, it didn't go center. It was trying to shift right, so what it did was, and so I didn't have one that was more closer to the perimeter. I just opened up and made it round with my Dremel until my D2S can fit both. Now it's time to mount them from of course, the inside. Alright, I got my first D2S projector ready to mount. I'm going to find top. This is top of, looks like the driver headlight here. Yep. So we're gonna mount the projector. I've got the flexible kind of O-ring. That's for vibration control. So it's gonna go through the hole, and I'm gonna put this lock ring on it, noting the polarity, if you will. And then I'm gonna tighten it down. And then it's time to mount the reflector back in the headlight, the rear housing, so we can level it. Get started here. Both projectors mounted. With the rubber grommet between the stem and the back. Got the locking retaining washer, and then the blue ring, tightening ring, hand tightened. So when I mount these back to the black rear housing, I can then mount them to the car and level them. So this is the D2S bulb head kit. You can see that top notch right there. It's going to line up with that top notch right there. So I'm going to go ahead and seat this in, and then I'm going to tighten it down with the black plastic tightening ring. Alright, got the Morimoto ballast in, mounted with the D2S bulb in. You can see here I also have my bi-xenon relay coming out where the reflector, the back reflector, was originally mounted. And yeah, it goes together just like that. So now I get to remount them to the rear plastics and do some level testing. When putting the reflector assembly back in, start with the adjusting mount, so seat that in its PEM right there, and then you can pop these in, and then just tighten that a little bit, the PEM from the rear, so you know you are seated in there. So when you're leveling it, you've got that level point. That's the third point right there. We're just going to push in, push in, push in, tighten a little bit after seating in, mount to car, level. Alright, just going to do a basic power on test here for both HID headlights. I've got the OEM harness kind of just draped over the front here, and I've got my new connector that came with the innovated ballast connected to the low beam end. Again, I switched the polarity on that, so blue does not go to blue. Blue goes to black, I think. Blue goes to black, white goes to blue from the innovated kit to the OEM connector. So I'm just going to power on the headlights, make sure they both work really quick because I still have the plastic on them, and that'll tell me they're working, and then I can mount them and level them. Alright, so I'm ready to test leveling here. I might have to rotate the ballast, I might have to change the adjustment point to lift them up and down, but what I've done is I've ignored the bottom bracket, and I have just secured the top three mounts, making sure that they're just the way they want to sit, and honestly that's good enough to do a level job because it's sitting exactly where it would be with or without the bottom piece. Got my D2S bulb connected to my ballast that connects with the innovated connector connected to my low beam. Power it on here and make sure we look good. Alright, so both lit up, that's a good thing. And from here I've got some leveling you can do. I'm going to lift up the right side, I'm going to rotate the driver's side and get us in spec here. But looking good and bright. Alright, so now that I got the headlights nice and level, I had to rotate this one a little bit and I had to bring this one down just with that adjustment nut. And from here I want to tighten the projectors down. So I have to remove the bulb for that, and then I will tighten that ring again, and because I left it loose so I could adjust it, rotate it as needed. So after that's the headlights removed, I will then tighten down the projector again, and then I'll refit it just to make sure nothing got too out of shape. Alright, I got a final tighten and level the projectors, so I've done that. Basically what you want to avoid is tightening it and then having that rotate, so you progressively tighten it. I take it 3 times. I tighten it, I check it, I tighten it, check it. If I do a final tighten and check and it looks good, throwing a beam against that line. Alright, so with the headlights in the car and leveled out, I'm now going to work on the lens. So I'm going to try to retrofit one of the Diode Dynamics C-Light in this channel right here. So I'm going to remove all these plastics right here. I'll let you know how that goes. Alright, so with 5 Phillips screws removed, you'll see them, but example location 1, 2, 3, 4. I lost one, but you'll see them. 5 screws. And then I'm going to remove this reflector, and then I'm going to pull this out, noting that these clips are going to need to be relieved so that assembly comes out. With minimal effort, the the rear inner plastics came out. I then flipped them around. Excuse me, this is still. Yeah, I didn't flip it around. Just pulled it straight out. And then from here, I'm going to remove these plastics right here. I had it loose, but I'm basically separating this and this. Alright, so with the inner plastics removed, I want to separate the inner lens for the C-Light, and I do that by working these tabs outwards, like that, which will separate the C-Light. Continue to work around. Now that I have access to what's underneath the clear C-Light lens, I'm going to see which Diode Dynamics C-Light fits better, either the WRX or the Legacy Outback. This is the Outback Legacy C-Light from Diode Dynamics, and it's much better than a WRX because the WRX is thinner, so I can't really make it over here. And what individuals have done, Lightworks Global specifically, they say they trim this. I'm a little apprehensive, but I've really got no other option. I've got to trim both sides, so I'll let you know how that goes. Kind of a moment of truth here. I've got the C-Light in from the Subaru Forester and the Outback into the Forester. You can tell I'm tired here. 12-volt power supply. Just want to see it work before I trim it. Alright, so I've trimmed the top. It does still fit, or excuse me, it does still work. So what I'm going to do from here is I found a nice kind of groove where this wants to adhere. I'm going to take apart my other headlight to get them both side by side to make sure I'm doing everything symmetrical. I did drill a pilot hole. Basically, this is just to anchor it to that point at the top. Alright, last tip for retrofitting the Outback C-Lights into the Forester housing. I tried to adhere this to this side. I was unable to because it has to run the same channel. So I've got to basically tuck this into the clear lens for that. And then what that does, it kind of contorts stuff. So my anchor here is doing a good job to pivot that end, but I'm seeing warpage. This side wants to pull up. So to control that, I've kind of tapped a screw hole and put a plastic screw in there so it cannot bend anymore. So when I tuck this in, and that is tucked in the reflector, that's going to be nice and straight. I'll show you the finished product here in a moment. So now this is sitting flush, and we are looking good. Alright, so these are the two inner C-Light housings, if you will. And I've got the Diode Dynamics C-Light from the Outback retrofitted inside. And it's looking nice and flush to the rear as much as I can because I want to diffuse that light. I don't want it to look like a bunch of little spotlights. So now I'm going to put these back in the entire housing, and I'm going to take my projectors in that housing and I'm going to bring it all together and put it in the oven and bake it all together, reversing everything I've done. So now I'm going to take these housings out, and I'm going to reheat my oven and put the lens back on. Before I put these headlights back together, I need to add my shroud and do a cleaning. So I just did a light cleaning just to get my fingerprints off of where I touched the reflector, and then I'll blow out. When you are resealing your headlights, I definitely recommend taking Morimoto or similar butyl glue. Take a thin strip and just run it alongside like a thin bead. You could do that by cutting a piece off and then stretching it as you go along, tacking, stretch, tack, so you have a fresh bead. So I've done that with both headlights. I'm gonna do a final cleaning, then I'm gonna stage the pieces together, and then I'm gonna bake them and mold them together. Let's get it. All right, fam, so I've got my new Butyl glue installed. I went along, anything I think I had fingerprints on, I'll go and I'll just remove them with a clean microfiber towel. I try to minimize anytime I have my hands on something, I'm holding the back of it, like the lens you've seen. And then I turn the unit upside down and I blow out again with my trusty Ryobi. So at this point I've cleaned the interior, as well as the interior of the reflector housing here. So I'm ready to stage them together so they can move towards the baking process and resealing. So let me center this for you. And as we know, this side has like a root, it kind of roots in there. So we're gonna put that side in first, and you're not going to get it, you're not just gonna press it in and seat it, it's gonna need to be heated, and that's why we rebake, and everything forms together and seals and life is good. So without further ado here, you'll see we're just kind of staging this. So I'm gonna work with this side, and I'm just gonna kind of seat it in where it wants to go. And sometimes you can't all seat it all the way in. It looks like this model. We're gonna be able to get nice and close right where we wanna be. So when we take this out of the oven, it's just gonna be a matter of compressing it using little clips to ensure it stays as the glue hardens again. So not forcing anything at this stage, are noting the clips are still in the kind of outbound location, if you will, ready to be passed by the little tab. So we look to be in a good place here. So when we heat it, it's just going to be as simple as compressing the two together and using little clips, which we'll show you in just a moment. Okay, time to bake the headlights. You can see I'm at a convection oven, 260 degrees. I usually go for about 10 to 12 minutes to determine how soft that Butyl glue is, depending on the age of it and the manufacturer. I do cover the front lens in wet towel just to make sure I don't damage the lens. That will sometimes cause a lot of condensation inside the headlight. You don't have to worry about that, it'll all dry out. Alright, so I got my headlights sealed up. I actually had to open them a second time to switch these shrouds. The shroud I had chose did not protrude enough when I closed and sealed it. So keep a note of that as you'll test your shroud by putting your lens cover on, but it's not going to be fully seated. In my case, it was about a ½ inch from pushing that back corner, and I thought I was going to clear, and there was an opening right there. So I switched shrouds. I'll let you know what shroud I chose because it's escaping my memory right now. So from here, I'm going to add my wiring harness back. I'm going to include a picture of what that looks like in the schematic diagram. While I'm looking at it, I highly recommend these 2-inch anvil clips when you're putting together your headlight so you can clamp it all together. Alright, so I just wanted to give an overview of my wiring. I do as much as I can on the headlight itself, and I've kind of organized the wires for the accessory I've added. So first off, the C-Light goes into that hole. I just used some Morimoto, some Butyl glue, and sealed that up. There was the second light that went over here. I snipped that off, and I ran the wire back, and I electrical taped it. All the wiring, I tried to follow the same, contour of everything, direction. Turn signal, I tap into with the Morimoto. I just run it alongside there. Excuse me, the Diode Dynamics C-Light. Right down here. So one end comes from the C-Light and the other taps into what is required. So I've got it running into I've got it spliced right here for the turn signal, and then I have the high beam spliced, and I added a connector between, so if I ever have to separate them, I can easily. But the high beam's connected to the relay that goes in there, the little actuator for the bi-xenon. And then my C-Light is controlled by my ignition again, so I have that pigtailed out of here, so kind of organized pigtailing right there. So I'm gonna get it fitted to the car and see what's up. When I have my headlights mounted, I'm gonna be finishing up my wiring for my fog light. Well, my fog light uses a separate relay kit that came with it. I'm gonna be going through a hole back here and going to the internal cabin where there'll be a switch. And I'll include that brand name because that's a nice touch to have that kind of OEM style switch. And it's also on a discrete circuit. So should anything happen to my lights, I still have my fog light. On a note of power, I did also want to run a second relay kit, so I'm not pulling the power off of the low beam. But these are only 35 watt HIDs, so I'm gonna actually just continue using that. And if I have trouble, instead of going directly to the inverter, the ballast, I'll say, I would go to a relay kit first, and that relay kit would switch on with the low beams from that power source, and then pull the power ultimately from the battery for the low beam. That's in case I have any flickering or anything like that. My DRL, so the C-Lights, I'm going to use just my ignition wire, so I'm actually using an fuse out of circuit kit. I'll be tying that to the internal cabin's fuse box at the accessory or the cigar fuse to make sure I have ignition switched. So whenever I turn the ignition, you have those nice bright C-Lights there. So that's about it. I'm going to show you the final mounting of everything where I chose to mount the ballast and so forth. Before I get ready to wrap up the headlight wiring, I just want to show you the rough overlay of the wiring locations I've used. I come out of the firewall with the yellow is the trigger for the fog light kit, and the red is the ignition for my C-Light. Follow the red all the way, then it combines with the fog light kit. My fog light kit I wanted to run out of the fuse box with an fuse. I bought the wrong fuse sizes, so I'm going to I just tapped it into the battery for now. And I've got the OEM, not the OEM, but the fog light kit fuse and relay right there. I like to keep everything centralized. And then from there, the rest of the fog light kit, as well as the C-Light, the red cable for my ignition, comes down here. I meet another red C-Light cable or cable intended for the C-Light. That's just, again, my ignition tied together right there. And then it shoots securely into a wiring harness with, again, my fog light. And I come all the way through over here. So there's where my fog light kit, my passenger side comes out. I'm picking up a grounding point here for the fog light kit. And then I have my C-Light, my ignition wire draped right here. For the rest of this video, I'll probably include some diagrams and some pictures of the final mounting locations, but we're in it to win it at this point. Alright, so I was just about to wrap up this video and I realized I did not have the best images for where I mounted everything. So here's the passenger side, and you can see my ballast I mounted just really running, it runs back with a wire, and so I zip tied it to that wire, and just to show you here, it's nice and secure. I prefer mounted somewhere, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. And then in there you can see the Diode Dynamics, same method, just kind of hanging freely, not a lot of weight. And we're about 6 months in right now without any problems. And then on the right side here, very similar, you can see the OEM wiring harness. And then underneath my battery, you can see my ballast right there. So just a couple ideas there to help you.